Why do girls hate their bodies so much? Why is that? Why? And the reasons are big and bad and powerful. And little people like us must do something to stand up to the big, powerful voices that are creating self-esteem issues and all the other issues that girls have, and boys for that matter, in order to make money. And that's the bottom line, isn't it?
Welcome to Uprising. Each episode looks inside what it takes to lead the most dynamic and successful cultural movements. Some of them in the business world, some in the social realm, some in politics, and some in between, to see why people start uprisings. What gives those initiatives momentum and keeps them going? And most important, what lessons can you learn from these movements and how to apply them to your business and even personal life? Let's explore the secret to sparking movements that move people into action.
Passionate ideas.
Controversial ideas.
Uprising ideas.
The power is now in the hands of anyone.
To start a cultural movement.
Your movement. To move the world.
Welcome to another edition of Uprising, our second show in 2017. And this weekend, there is a great manifestation in Washington. There are thousands of women that are going to descend on Washington and march. I thought it would be a great chance to take a moment and just talk a little bit about the role of women, but more importantly, the role of gender. And today I have a really interesting guest all the way from London who's joining us. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Oh, hi there. Well, my name's Abi Moore. I'm a twin, which is relevant because myself and my twin are the founders of a campaign here in London, which is called Pinkstinks. We started our campaign roughly about 9 years ago now, I believe. I can't believe the time has flown. And Pinkstinks is a campaign which focuses on what we describe as the pinkification of girlhood, and really is focusing on stereotyping of little girls and how this affects them as girls, but sort of how it's internalized, I guess, and how the messages which are fed to girls affect them as they grow up. And the reason why we are focusing on the colour pink is about focusing on the way that the colour pink is used to denote what is and therefore isn't for girls.
So girls as in like overly feminine, and therefore pink as a colour stinks.
Yeah, and it's passive and it tends to be about pretty.
So what do you do? Did you decide to write a manifesto, or how did you start?
I used to work for CNN, which I'm sure you know well.
The president-elect calls it the fake news network, but
That's
keep
right.
going. Yeah, keep going.
I'd been doing some films about visionaries, and one of them was I filmed in the States, actually. It was with a woman who was a nanotechnologist, and it was a really complicated story about a new technique to treat cancer, and it was incredibly complicated, but it was a fascinating story, and this woman was incredible. And the big news story when I arrived home was something about Paris Hilton.
That was hot.
I can't remember what the story was. It was a ridiculous story, but it was everywhere. And it was so not only was it all over the news everywhere, but it was all over the place at work. And this was driving me bananas, desperately trying to get people to be interested in this incredible story of a new way to treat cancer. I stood on the platform of my station going to work in the morning, and I called Emma on the phone and I said, we've got to do something about this.
So fair to say you were pretty pissed, as you say in the UK.
Really,
you say pissed? Is that the right word?
We say pissed off.
Pissed off. Okay.
Yeah, we were pissed off. I know you say you were pissed. Pissed means drunk.
Oh,
here.
right. I'm sorry. Exactly. You weren't pissed yet.
Maybe we were a bit drunk later possibly.
Yeah. Well, behind every great movement is a catalyst. There's an instigation. Something that creates this sort of passion and anger. So I'm glad.
Yeah.
That's great. I'm glad you're talking about it.
it's funny thinking back on it, actually, because it seems like a lifetime ago. I guess, and it would have been at least 10 years ago, actually, because it took a while for us to come up with what it was we were going to do. And one of the great things, I mean, I work in the media and my sister works for charities, and the combination of the two things was actually quite useful because we had a lot of contacts that were and friends who had skills which we were able to utilise, whether that was journalists who had a little black book and were able to get, give us help with doing a press release and what have you. But also Emma has a friend who had run campaigns before, and she sat down with us and talked us through how to think about a campaign.
And what did she say? What were, if you remember exactly, what were sort of the key things that she
Firstly,
said?
there have been campaigns. There are millions of campaigns. People are always campaigning. So you have to think about what you're asking for and try and make it achievable. And if you can't make that achievable, and let's face it, I want equality for all is probably a little bit too much to ask in one campaign. But then break it down into smaller, more achievable things, because you do want to see results and you want to have something that's tangible that you can be aiming for. So we decided to target one particular retailer for our first campaign. So Pinkstinks was a thing, but we had a campaign within it, and that was our first one, which was, we have a store that's called Mothercare. I don't know if you have it in the States. And
similar brand.
Yeah, so
retailer,
it was about just really the pinkification in Mothercare.
Right.
God, was it specific than that? I can't remember now. So that was the first thing. And she said, if you think about campaigns that have worked, now there's one, the smoking campaign was incredibly successful in this country. And more recently, actually, the plastic bags in shops has been so successful. It's absolutely changed. It made enormous change very quickly. People often don't like change, but actually they get used to it. So when there was a ban on smoking, people hated the idea of it, and they hated it when it came in. But give it 6 months, and nobody can imagine you ever being able to smoke in a restaurant or in a pub or whatever. So the campaign was brilliantly run, and it had a very clear message. So that was really her main thing. Now, having said that, of course, you could argue really that Pinkstinks is slightly confusing, and it certainly did confuse people. But the success of Pinkstinks, which you've already sort of alluded to, and I would totally agree with, is that if we called ourselves something like the Campaign for Equality for Children or whatever, honestly, nobody would care. It's boring, it's not going to make headlines, and it certainly isn't going to get you in the press. Now, when you start being a little bit more edgy about things and saying, well, actually, yeah, we think it does stink, and it's got the colour pink in, which lots of people, well, my God, we got some incredible headlines, actually. And we got called all sorts of things for saying it. But, here we're still here. And it has, I think that the combination of the two things actually worked quite well for us.
So you launched this campaign. You by targeting a store that represented everything you were trying to fight against. I guess people started immediately to get behind you. I mean, you said that there was a lot of controversy at the beginning. Were more people against you, or were there more people with you, or was it a bit of both?
It was very mixed, and it was quite extreme in some respects. So we were very naive, really, at the beginning. We thought that we would be lucky, for example, that if we got a piece in our local newspaper, it's called the Lewisham Shopper or something. Lewisham is a borough in London where we live. But we thought, well, that would be a start. And we very naively sent a press release out with some friends of ours who were journalists who helped us to come up with a decent press release. And within about 3 weeks, we'd been on the main national news, on all the tabloid papers, as well as in the broadsheet papers. I mean, everywhere. We were on the breakfast sofa. We were on TV, and then we made it across the pond into ABC News. They came and filmed with us. I mean, it was just a complete shock. But something in what we were saying had obviously resonated. Now, that wasn't all positive. In fact, a lot of it was very negative to begin with. And it was really difficult to deal with because we were not ready for it. I think the press, weirdly, the first place that we got press in was not in the Lewisham Shopper. It was actually in the Daily Telegraph, which is a
major
big, broadsheet, very serious newspaper.
Very serious, big newspaper,
and very
right.
conservative newspaper as well.
And what was the headline that they put on your story?
It was in the marketing consumer pages. It was Henry Wallop is the name of the journalist.
Uh-huh.
And he wrote a very balanced piece about us and our campaign with mother care. It was just before Christmas as well, by the way. So we timed it so that we were coming into peak consumer time of year, if you like. I mean, it really wasn't, there was nothing outrageous. It was quite a good piece. We were quite pleased with it and couldn't quite believe our luck, to be honest. But once you get in one of those papers, all the other journos are reading them and the floodgates opened and the phone did not stop ringing. And then we ended up in tabloid newspapers, and we've got some pretty horrendous ones of those here. As I'm sure
give me an example of one of them.
Well, the Daily Mail, we were in the Sun. I mean, all of them.
And what were kind of the headlines?
The headlines were that women want to ban the colour pink. We wanted to ban the colour pink was pretty much the slant, their sort of spin on the story.
But that must have helped in a sense. I mean, it's the storyline is obviously that here are two women that are trying to, change something about the world that they think is wrong. They want to right a wrong. And you make your statement, pink shouldn't be used as it has. And a lot of people start to say, that sounds stupid. And then the other people say, well, hold on a second, that sounds really smart. And so the tabloids do a great job of adding oxygen to the fire.
I think in hindsight, of course, absolutely. It was a great thing. It was really good for us. And we had to, firstly get some pretty thick skins very quickly.
Did you get, what happened when it first came out? Did you immediately feel embarrassed or anxious?
I felt very anxious. Quite sick actually a lot of the time. I felt that we were being misrepresented. I went through every sort of every emotion really. We both did.
And you're a media expert. You work in the media.
Well, yeah, but I certainly wasn't used to being the one who was answering the questions. I was always the one I was behind camera, asking questions and pulling the strings, if you like. And so it was a big eye opener actually in many respects. It was quite difficult to really gauge how we were being perceived at the beginning. We did start to get a lot of emails. We weren't on Twitter. We weren't very active on Twitter in those days. It wasn't a big thing, or did it even exist? I can't remember now. We're much more, Twitter's great for us these days, but so we weren't getting abuse on Twitter, but we were getting some very abusive emails, which were quite horrendous. And I think at the time we had a couple of organisations that we were working with, one of which is called the Sheila McKechnie Foundation, who we won an award with them quite early on for our campaign, Women Making Change campaign, and they are an organisation who support campaigners. They're brilliant. Anyway, one of the things that they provide is advice and an ear, really, when you need it. And we had to call them and say, we need some help and advice with this, because we can't deal with. We were both working full time at the time, and I was at Amnesty. I'd left CNN by this point. I was working at Amnesty International, and I remember having to go out from work and get in a Sky News truck. It was pouring with rain and it was dark, and I had to do a live interview on Sky News with this dreadful woman who's called Nina Mishkov, who writes for the Daily Mail. So she's like the opposition incarnate. She was dressed in pink from head to toe and sitting in a lovely warm studio while I was outside in a gale holding onto a large umbrella, doing a down the line interview, which is quite a difficult thing to do. And it was pretty much the first time I'd done it. She said to me live on air, women like you want all other women to wear tweed and have moustaches.
Well, Controversy sells newspapers, so clearly that was her objective. Society continues to change and shift as it pertains to, gender, sexuality. It's evolved a great deal, especially here in the U.S. I'm sure also in the U.K. So do you think this issue, the Pinkstinks, movement that the issue you're fighting for, do you think it's changed a lot from when you started?
Yeah, I think it has. And I'd love to sit here and tell you that we're on top of that change, if you catch my meaning. I'm not entirely convinced that we are, actually, but I think, things have changed and not all for the better. I do think that they have changed for the better in some ways, though. And
can you give me an example of a way that it's changed for the better and a way that it's changed for the worse?
Funny, I've actually been having a little bit of a conversation with someone on Twitter about this, and I do, so here's one of the ways I think things have changed for the better, and in fact this is quite recent. I think that there's been a shift in female protagonists in movies, in films. I think that we've seen some better ones recently, and we've seen quite a few better ones, actually. That's not to say there's not an awful long way to go, but representation of women as sort of lead characters in films, I think, has got better, but also hand in hand with that, it's become easier to talk about it without sort of feeling embarrassed to do so. I think that it's easier. I think one of the big successes of our campaign, certainly in this country, is that we were one of the first to talk about these issues, and we enabled other people to start talking about. We went through a lot of pain at the beginning, but we came out the other end feeling able to have a sensible discussion about the issues that we were raising, because at the beginning we couldn't. People were calling us ugly lesbians who need to shut up and who need to whatever, but and it was that bad, it was that ridiculous the way people felt, but we weren't able to sort of get into a situation where we were being given the chance to really talk about what it was that we wanted to talk about. I think that has changed, and after a lot of pain, we are able to have that conversation, and a lot more people are able to have it. And of course, that's what we want. We don't want to be doing all the work. Right. We can't, and we don't want to be. And the issue of women, lead characters, whether it's in kids programs or whether it's in blockbuster movies or in books or wherever, I think we have seen a bit of a change. It's not enough. And the argument I've been having online with somebody, on Twitter with somebody, was actually about Rogue One, which I don't know if you saw, but has a female lead, but hardly any other female characters in the entire film. So to me, that wasn't good enough. It's a great film. I enjoyed it, but there's more to be done. Where I think things have got worse is, really with the rise of social media and I guess with the way that kids and young people are consuming their media has become so difficult to monitor and to keep abreast of, if you like, to even know what it is that they're looking at. And it's clear that really it's a wash with quite damaging messages about body image and about, women, girls' body. Well, no, not just girls' bodies. I mean, just young bodies in general. And I think that feels like a new animal, a new beast, if you like, that's really difficult for us to know how to get a grip of. I've got a 14-year-old son, so now he's 14, so my oldest son, so he spends all of his time looking at social media. He doesn't watch TV. He watches YouTube. And I have no idea what he's watching.
But I guess ultimately the values that you instill in him must surely help guide him through the forest of, imagery and all these other things, in a sense. I mean, I guess that's all we parents have to, at least what we have to, our tools that we have to help guide kids. I mean, we can't, as you say, we don't know all the the levels and depths of social media. It feels like Dungeons and Dragons. Every time you peel a layer off, it goes deeper.
Yeah.
But you can train them. You can give them, the right and the wrong and the values. And it feels like Pinkstinks really was a values-based point of view on society or philosophy. That in order to be a better society, we really need to stop putting girls on pedestals and treating them as if they're fragile creatures, because they're super intelligent and they can go off and become great technologists and doctors and change the world. And so, I mean, that's a great value. Do you remember, going back now, but you started your movement. Do you remember the first email you got? Or the first?
Yeah, I loved it. I'm so pleased that you've asked this question, and I will say it wasn't the first, but it was one of the first, and it was the email which probably in our darkest times when Emma and I were thinking, oh my God, what have we unleashed? Because I felt, when you lost weight with the stress of it, I honestly felt sick most of the time. For a good 6 months of this enormous media rush. The email came at that time, and it was from a little girl, and she said, "Pinkstinks is my voice."
Wow.
And to this day, really, it makes me feel quite emotional, because she felt that she was a bit different and that she didn't want to do a lot of the things that a lot of the other girls in her class were doing. I think she was about 9 or 10 years old, and and for her, our campaign really did sort of encapsulate something for her that meant enough to her that she could say something like that. And I'll never, ever, till the day I die, I'll never forget it. It was just a fabulous thing. It was fantastic.
Mm. This show is all about movements and uprisings and people who instigate them and come up with the ideas and passions behind them. And for those people listening, and there are probably a lot of people out there, planning a movement, that period of time that, when you launched this and you started to get publicity, you had this journalist dress up in pink and, talk about your ambition to make every woman wear tweed. You said you started with a mustache, exactly. I think it's totally understandable that you would start to feel a certain anxiety, unease, pain, stress in your stomach and stuff like that. So you talked about losing weight. But looking back on it now, wasn't it at the same, I guess if you had more experience, you would have been able to handle that differently. You may have even seen it as an energy, a positive force, rather than something to be anxious about. If you look back on it now, do you think you would have controlled yourself, the way you felt about yourself, differently?
Yeah, I think I would feel, and I do feel more positive today. Definitely. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger, I think is the saying, isn't it? And it does. And I think Emma and I both feel much more resilient, and we don't get the hassle that we used to get anymore much anyway, so it's not really a problem. But yeah, I would feel differently about it, and I'd love to be able to just whisper in my ear, to myself, but then don't worry, this is going to be a great thing.
So if there's someone listening today, a student or a young person or a youthful person, doesn't matter how old they are, who are planning to do a movement, what advice would you have for them?
Well, funnily enough, I was just going to mention that the Sheila McKechnie Foundation, who were the people that we called and said we need help getting through this, one of the things that they said to us, and again, I never forgot this, was that you need to, you've got a delete key on your computer, and you need to use it.
That's great.
And they were right. We felt, I think, obliged to react to everything that was thrown at us. And actually what we learned was that we don't need to do that at all.
Right.
We can, we've got the publicity, people know who we are, and therefore we can start to sort of control and to choose what it is that we want. Now, that's not to say that it's a perfect situation, but we just started to press delete or just to ignore. And once we started doing that, it's funny, I've still got the folder today. I saved a lot of the emails from the time just to look back on, and some of them are hilarious. and I save them into good ones and bad ones folder. And the bad ones folder is just, it's like a comedy, really. So once you begin to laugh at it, or once you sort of, I don't know, somehow having almost being given the permission to just go, do you know what, delete, you're gone, you're out of my life, you're nothing, I don't really care what you think. What I come from a place where I know that what I'm doing is right, or it's certainly right for me. You know, this feels like the right thing to be doing and saying. So once we almost had to find someone to give us permission to go to press delete, and I think it was a magic bit of guidance, actually, because we were much freer after that. We weren't bogged down by this dark voice and big dark noise that felt so damaging and so nasty, vitriolic, really. It disappeared, and then we had the freedom. And the other thing was we didn't, if a radio station in Glasgow rang us up on 6 o'clock in the morning and said, would you mind coming on in 2 hours to talk about blah blah, started saying, I'm sorry, I can't, I'm not ready, you haven't given me enough time. And who am I going to be talking with, actually? So at the beginning, we were often put on the sofa with some ridiculous, it would always be a Daily Mail type, one of our almost dreadful tabloids.
The dreadful woman in pink again.
The dreadful woman in pink. It would be another incarnation of her plus us. And we got annoyed with that. It's like, we're not here for your entertainment. That you know what the producers are trying to do. They want an argument. They want your entertainment. What we need to do is to be in more control of what it is we're talking about here. And so we stopped doing it. And that was just a huge relief. We don't have to. And so we pick and choose now. And we still do press. But I mean, anything less than Radio 4, it sounds really snobby in a way, but I don't know. I want to talk. I want to have sensible conversations. And yeah, that would be, you really do have to sort of jump off a cliff at the bit in the beginning and put your toe in the water is maybe a better way to see how things are going to go. But you can try and control it. And likewise, the same goes on social media. So on Twitter, I mean, I simply do not engage with people that are talking nonsense. I just don't. I just ignore them.
So now it's 2017. What challenges, opportunities do you think exist in the current environment? I
think, social media is one of the big ones. I know I keep talking about it, but it's hugely worrying. It's odd though, isn't it? Because of course it's a bit of a double-edged sword. I mean, social media is brilliant. Social media is the only way that a campaign like ours was able to exist. We had a tiny bit of money from a couple of sort of grants that we won. I mean, minute bit of money, but we weren't able to employ people or pay ourselves or sustain ourselves in that way. We had to find other ways of doing it that would sit alongside having full-time jobs and children to. But of course, the flip side of that is how, as loud as you raise your voice, then the other opposite, diametrically opposed voices are raising theirs even louder. And that, I think you mentioned at the beginning the march which is happening in Washington, and there's a sister march happening in London. The general feeling in this country is maybe not quite as desperate as you might feel over there, but it's not far behind, where we feel like there are changes afoot, and we're not quite sure how things are going to go, and that women's issues and things that affect us are feeling that they might be under attack. Now, where our campaign fits in with all of that might seem a little bit tenuous, but I think there's a big opportunity in a way for us to start to be shouting a little bit louder and to understand the importance of what we do and how it sits with other campaigns and other issues that affect not just women but everybody. And I guess that's another thing that I really wanted to say is that about our campaign is that everything that I've ever done, and my sister, but me personally, has done on the campaign is always, for me, I've always had my sons in mind. So whilst it's about girls and marketing towards girls, it has everything to do with my sons. always. It always has done, and it always will, because I think equality benefits us all, and it will benefit them. So I think what's great is that we can talk in a sensible way now about these issues, and there are still people that go, "Oh, haven't you got better things to do?" And why is it? Who cares? My daughter, she chooses what she wants. It's up to her. And of course, we're not attacking a child because of what she chooses, and we're certainly not attacking her. But the question we're asking is, why is she making the choices she's making?
Well, Abi, this has been thoroughly enlightening, and the Pinkstinks movement is something that I think has global relevance. If people, and this show is listened to all over the place, and actually I want to do a shout out because I, funnily enough, have a pretty big following in Scotland, so I wanted to do a shout out to my friends in Scotland. But if people, hi Scotland, if people wanted to find out more about Pinkstinks, where would they go?
We do have a website. It's slightly out of date. The best place to contact us or to find out what we're talking about is on Twitter, actually. Pinkstinks UK is our Twitter handle. We are on there most days, and it's quite lively because people are always sending us stuff and are always linking us to things. We call our followers our stinkers, which is a term of endearment, I promise. And yeah, so if you do, if you want to send us anything that you've seen that is pretty awful, send us something that you've seen that's fantastic and is the way forward. Those are the things that we really want to be shouting about. And I guess the big companies that I was just talking about, the people that are selling this stuff. One good thing about the internet and Twitter in particular is that they've got people, it's someone's job to check what is happening to mother care on Twitter. So recently we've been doing something with Tesco and some dreadful pajamas that they've just put out, which are like something from the 1950s. So their eyeballs are on Twitter, and they want to know what people are saying about their products. So it's really important that we if something is out of order and doesn't seem right, tell them.
Right.
This is the year 2017 and we expect better. And we've had results doing that. It's by a really effective way to get them to listen. So yeah, get in touch with us because we do love to hear from people all over the world, and we do hear from people all over the world. It's great.
Well, thank you, Abi Moore, for your time and for your passion and telling us your story. Highly fascinating, and I wish you all the best. And keep on trucking, as they say.
We will.
I will be sporting my pink sweater on Saturday during the march in Washington.
Yay.
Yeah. Thank you for joining our Uprising today and listening to our show. If you missed the show, or if you want to find out more about who was on, or if you want to learn more about how to create your own Uprising, please go to uprisingmovements.com. You can also download this Uprising program from iTunes. Uprising was produced by Nicola Keneally and Adam Helen, with special help from Melanie Boardman, Karin Drachenberg, Philippa Freeman, Brianna Campbell, Fashad Faroudi, Mark Bruzy, Will Issam, James Politi, and Jonathan Weeks. My name is Scott Goodson, and you've been listening to Uprising. What we can learn about movements and uprisings that are shaping our world in business, in society, and in between. For more on cultural movements and movement marketing, be sure to pick up a copy of the best-selling book Uprising, How to Build a Brand and Change the World by Sparking Cultural Movements, available on Amazon.com. Music for Uprising composed by Charles Duchateau.